They tore down a section of Ruby's diner expecting old pipes. But what fell out wasn't plumbing. It was a rusted leather purse, decades old, with a faded Waitress badge still pinned inside. Mary Lee had vanished in 1965. Everyone assumed she'd run away. But as investigators examined the wall, they realized the bricks had been added weeks after her disappearance. And they found something in a box. Something terrifying. A crumpled note, fingerprints in the plaster, pointed to someone who could never be questioned. And what happened next will shock the whole town. The story begins in the golden glow of 1960s America, when diners were the beating hearts of small towns, where every waitress knew her customers by name, and where vanishing from a crowded public place seemed absolutely impossible. But for one young woman, that impossibility was about to become a chilling reality. Mary Ann Lee was 23 years old in November of 1965. To anyone in Lindbrook, New York, she wasn't just another waitress. She was the familiar smile behind the counter at Ruby's diner. Always warm, always attentive. She remembered your order, how you took your coffee, and sometimes even the story you told her last week. She had a way of making people feel seen, like the world paused for a moment just to listen. At 5'3", with a slender frame made deceptively strong from years of carrying heavy trays, Mary moved with practiced grace. Her dark brown hair was always tied back in a neat ponytail during her shifts, and her brown eyes held a kindness that felt genuine in a world that wasn't always kind. Born on October 11th, 1942, right there in Lindbrook, Mary grew up in the shadow of the Great Depression and World War II. Her father, John Lee, operated machines at the P. Lorillard Tobacco Factory, the city's largest employer, his hands permanently stained from the work that kept his family afloat. Her mother, Kate Lee, was the kind of woman who made ends meet, no matter how thin they stretched. She sewed for neighbors from their small home, repairing torn sleeves, hemming worn skirts, and occasionally crafting handmade dresses for local weddings. Mary was the eldest of three, protective of her younger sister Jane, who was 3 years her junior, and endlessly patient with her brother Toby, 5 years younger, who followed her everywhere like a shadow. The Lees lived in a modest 2-bedroom house in the West End, a quiet working-class neighborhood painted in faded pastels, the kind of place where screen doors creaked in summer, where every porch had a rocking chair, and where nobody bothered locking their doors at night. Neighbors waved from across the street, children played until the streetlights flickered on, and the rhythm of life never seemed to change. For Mary, Ruby's diner wasn't just her workplace. It was the heart of that rhythm. Imagine living your whole life wondering what really happened. Don't let another mystery slip by. Subscribe now, or you'll miss the stories that could have changed everything. Every night when she closed up, she'd hum the same old tune her mother used to sing while sewing. A quiet, haunting melody that regulars joked could still be heard faintly after hours. Years later, when the diner's walls came down, one of the workers swore he heard that same tune echoing faintly through the dust. In a town built on routine and trust, nothing ever went wrong, until one November night when Mary locked the diner doors for the last time. By morning, Ruby's diner would open as usual, but something would send shivers through the spine of the town soon. Mary's childhood had been simple, modest, but full of small joys. Summer evenings meant neighborhood parties where radios played old swing tunes and families brought their best dishes to share. Sundays were reserved for church, the one place everyone in the community gathered, no matter what kind of week they'd had. At school, Mary wasn't the smartest or the most athletic, but she was the kind of student teachers remembered, polite, dependable, and genuinely kind. By the summer of 1960, at 18, she graduated from New York High School. While some of her classmates packed for college or planned their weddings, Mary stayed home. Her family needed her paycheck more than her diploma on a wall. Just 2 weeks after graduation, she put on a pressed white uniform, tied her hair back, and began her first day at Ruby's Diner, a job that would define the next 5 years of her life. Ruby's Diner wasn't just a place to eat, it was the heartbeat of Lindbrook. Perched at the corner of Apple Street and Cherry Street, the busiest intersection downtown, the diner glowed day and night with its bright chrome siding, flickering red and blue neon signs, and wide glass windows that let the whole town peer inside. Inside, the diner was a picture-perfect slice of 1,960 seconds Americana, a long counter lined with red vinyl swivel stools, booths wrapped in shiny faux leather, and a black and white checkered floor that always gleamed, no matter how many customers came through the doors. The air smelled of coffee, fried bacon, and sugar, the kind of scent that made regulars feel at home. Behind it all stood the man who made Ruby's what it was, Caleb Allen, a stout, broad-shouldered man of 57 with a booming laugh and a reputation for being both fair and firm. He'd bought the place back in 1947 and turned it from a run-down roadside cafe into one of the most beloved diners in the city. Ruby's opened at 6 every morning and closed at 11 each night, 6 days a week, taking only Sundays off. The menu was simple but perfect: all-day breakfasts, golden pancakes, crispy hash browns, and hamburgers locals swore were the best in all of New York. Every morning, the diner's cook, Willa June, arrived before dawn to bake homemade pies that filled the air with the smell of cinnamon and butter. And the milkshakes? So thick, the straws stood upright without effort. A small miracle that regulars loved to show off to newcomers. For Mary, Ruby's became more than a workplace. It was a second home, a rhythm she could count on, a world she helped keep spinning. And even though she'd seen the same faces 1,000 times, she never lost that spark. That quiet joy that came from serving, listening, and belonging. On slow nights, Mary often joked that Ruby's walls could talk, that they'd seen everything, from first dates to final goodbyes. None of her co-workers ever thought those words would come back to haunt them, because just 5 years later, those same walls would talk, and what they'd reveal during the diner's demolition would shake Lindbrook to its core. Evil doesn't always roar. Sometimes it just waits for good people to scroll away. Mary's story was buried because no one spoke, no one looked twice. So if you're watching and not subscribing, congratulations. You've joined the silence that kept her hidden for decades. Mary worked the afternoon and evening shift, from 2 in the afternoon until 11 at night, every Tuesday through Saturday. It was long, demanding work that left most people exhausted. But not Mary. For her, those hours on her feet, juggling plates, refilling coffee cups, taking orders shouted over the hum of conversation, were exactly where she wanted to be. She thrived in the rhythm of Ruby's diner, the clatter of dishes, the hiss of the griddle, the laughter of regulars. It was her soundtrack. Mary had an uncanny memory for detail. She could glance across the counter and know instantly who needed a refill or who preferred extra napkins without being asked. Mr. Jameson always wanted his coffee black and extra hot, and it was always ready the second he sat down. Mrs. Schenk liked her toast, barely kissed by heat, just shy of golden brown. And young Tony Bamford, a schoolboy with messy hair and endless questions, stopped by almost every afternoon for a chocolate sundae. Mary never once forgot the extra cherry on top. Her warmth was effortless. She didn't just take orders, she connected with people. Every customer walked away feeling like they mattered, and her tips showed it. Week after week, she earned 20 to 30% more than any other waitress. Not because she asked for it, but because she made everyone feel seen. But what really set Mary apart wasn't just her work ethic. It was her heart. She had a quiet way of helping people without ever making it about herself. When a familiar face came in, looking downcast or counting pennies before ordering, Mary would find a way to make the bill lighter, or disappear entirely. More than once she covered meals for struggling families and claimed it was a mistake on the register when they tried to pay her back. Her kindness didn't stop at the diner doors either. She often brought leftovers to the alley behind Ruby's, where drifters sometimes slept, leaving food out without ever waiting for thanks. And as fate would have it, those same walls that echoed with her laughter would one day hold on to something else, something Mary could never have imagined as she wiped down her tables that last night. Because on the evening of November 13th, 1965, Mary Lee finished her shift, turned the key in the diner's front door, and vanished without a trace. The next morning, Ruby's diner opened as usual. But what happened next was sad. Danger doesn't announce itself. Every woman deserves safety. Don't wait for tragedy to learn the hard way. Get your survival guide in the pinned comment. She often stayed late after closing, helping Willa scrub the kitchen when the elderly cook's energy ran out. If a coal worker faced a family emergency or couldn't make it to their shift, Mary stepped in without hesitation or complaint. She still lived with her parents in 1965, and at 23, that wasn't unusual. Many unmarried women of the time remained at home until marriage. Mary contributed part of her earnings to help with family expenses, assisted her mother with daily chores, and carefully saved what little she could for the future she dreamed of: a modest home, a husband, and maybe children of her own someday. There was one man she imagined sharing that future with: Jack Henry, 25, a mechanic at Blues Auto Repair, his father's shop on West 5th Street. Jack and Mary had grown up just blocks apart, attended the same church, and had known each other for as long as they could remember. By 1962, their friendship had deepened into something more, and by October 1965, Everyone expected Jack to propose at any moment. Nearly every night that Mary worked, Jack could be found at Ruby's diner, seated at the counter, sipping coffee and eating a slice of pie just to be near her. Mary's routine was simple and consistent. She woke at 11 in the morning on workdays, late by most people's standards, but necessary when you didn't clock out until nearly midnight. Jack often joked that if those chrome walls of Ruby's could talk, they'd tell every detail of their love story, every laugh, every shared look across the counter. No one could have imagined how hauntingly true that line would become, because before the year was over, those same walls would hold a secret so dark it would silence the diner forever, and when that secret finally came out decades later, it would start right where Jack's words had once echoed. Every time someone says "I'll subscribe later," another story like Mary's stays buried. Evil doesn't need conspiracies, it just needs your apathy. So hit subscribe now, or you're siding with the bricks. She always began her day quietly, breakfast with her mother, a few household chores, and then a light lunch around 1 in the afternoon. At exactly 1:20, she'd leave the house, walking the 20 minutes to Ruby's diner, always arriving by 1:45, 15 minutes early, just as she preferred, giving herself time to tie her apron, check her station, and prepare for the busy shift that began at 2. The afternoon to evening shift was the most demanding. It began with a late lunch crowd, factory workers, shop clerks, office secretaries grabbing a quick meal before heading home. Things slowed slightly before dinner, then picked back up around 5, with a steady rush that lasted until about 8:30. After 9, the diner grew calm again. Only the regulars remained, a few night shift workers, a couple of teens lingering over milkshakes, and the occasional traveller stopping by for coffee before the long drive home. At 10:30, Mary began the closing process, wiping tables, restocking condiments, sweeping the floor, and organising everything for the morning crew. She never closed the diner alone. That was a rule set by Caleb Allen himself, the owner. Either he stayed late with her, or, on the nights he took off, another trusted employee filled in. Basic safety, basic business practice. But that policy, the one meant to keep everyone safe, was about to be broken, and in doing so, it would cost someone their life. Mary didn't have many indulgences or habits. She didn't smoke, a rarity in those days when nearly everyone did, and she only drank an occasional glass of red wine during special family dinners. Her true passion was cinema. Every Friday night, on her day off, she and Jack would take the bus to the New York Theatre downtown. Westerns, thrillers, musicals, it didn't matter. She loved them all. She also loved mystery novels, especially Agatha Christie, and her small bookshelf at home was filled with worn paperbacks she'd read multiple times. Yet, for all her warmth and good humour, there was a quiet sadness about Mary, a sense that something weighed on her spirit, though she never spoke about it directly. Jack once teased her about her love for mystery stories, saying, "You'd make a great detective someday." She laughed then, unaware that one day her own disappearance would become a mystery more perplexing than any novel she'd ever read, because on one cold November night, after serving her last table and locking the diner door, Mary Ann Lee vanished, and for nearly 70 years no one would understand how a person could disappear from a locked building without ever stepping outside. She truly loved her life, her job, her family, and Jack. But like many people her age, she quietly longed for more. Mary dreamed of travelling beyond Lindbrook, of seeing the ocean up close instead of just in postcards, and of one day owning a small house with a garden where she could plant roses and watch them bloom each spring. These might sound like simple dreams today, but for a waitress in 1965, they were ambitions that required hope, discipline, and patience. Her parents, John Lee, now 51, and Kate Lee, 49, were deeply proud of their daughter. Mary Lee was everything they had hoped she would be: responsible, humble, and endlessly kind. Her younger sister, Jane Lee, 20 years old, often turned to her for advice about life and love, while Toby Lee, the youngest at 18, worked alongside their father at the tobacco factory and watched over both of his sisters with fierce protectiveness. By October 1965, Mary's life seemed to have settled into something peaceful and full of promise. Jack was quietly saving for an engagement ring. Mary had recently been promoted to head waitress at Ruby's, a recognition of her hard work and the respect she earned from both customers and staff. The family was healthy, the future, for once, felt certain. But then came that ordinary autumn night, the one that began like all the others. The one that should have ended with Mary locking up, walking home and greeting her parents with a tired smile. Instead, it ended with silence, a silence so heavy and unexplainable that it would echo for 70 years. It's haunting to think that the very walls Mary had leaned against during her breaks, the same walls that had echoed with laughter, orders and clinking coffee cups, would one day tell the truth no one had dared to imagine. Because when the truth finally surfaced, it didn't come from witnesses, confessions or police files. It came from within those walls, the same walls that had trapped her secret, brick by brick, while life continued on the other side. Ignoring danger isn't neutral, it's dangerous. Stand up, stay aware, and protect those who can't always protect themselves. Get your survival guide in the pinned comment. The night of November 28, 1965, was a Friday. Ruby's diner was reasonably busy, though not unusually so. The air outside was mild for late November, about 16 degrees at 6 o'clock, cooling to 10 as dawn approached. No rain, no wind, just a calm autumn night in North Carolina. Ordinary in every way that mattered, except for what was about to happen. Mary arrived, as always, at 1:45 in the afternoon. Her pink uniform was freshly pressed, the white collar crisp, her apron neatly tied around her waist, practical white rubber-soled shoes, a small name badge on her left chest. She greeted Willa June in the kitchen, checked with Caleb Allen about the day's pie inventory, and began her shift exactly at 2. The afternoon unfolded like any other. Mary served factory workers stopping in for coffee and pie after long shifts, families with restless children ordering hamburgers and milkshakes, and businessmen finishing late meetings over steaming mugs of coffee. She smiled, took orders, carried plates, refilled cups, wiped counters, her rhythm so precise, it felt like a dance she'd practiced 1,000 times. 6 years of perfecting this quiet, familiar choreography. At 7:30, Jack Henry walked in, just like he always did. He took his usual stool at the far end of the counter, ordered a coffee and a slice of Willa's apple pie. Between orders, Mary drifted over to talk, teasing him about his messy hands from the garage, laughing about the film they planned to see the next night. It was all so normal, so beautifully, deceptively normal. At 9:45, Jack finished his pie and coffee. "I need to go," he said softly, leaning over the counter to kiss Mary's cheek. Caleb pretended to disapprove, but everyone smiled. "See you tomorrow night for the movie." "At 7, as always," Mary replied, her smile warm and familiar. "I love you, Mary," Jack said, the nickname only family and he ever used. She smiled again, unaware that it would be the last time anyone ever saw her alive. Earlier that week, she'd told Willa she never left the diner before every last table was spotless. "A place this clean keeps no secrets," she'd said with a laugh. But that night, the diner did. When Ruby's reopened the next morning, Mary's second pink uniform still hung neatly in her locker, untouched. But where is she? And for decades, no one would imagine just how close the truth had been. Right there, behind those spotless walls. Safety doesn't happen by accident. Every moment you hesitate is a moment someone could be at risk. Get your survival guide in the pinned comment. "I love you too. Drive carefully." Those were Mary's final words to Jack, before he stepped out into the cool November air. Jack left at exactly 9:48 that night. Several witnesses would later confirm seeing him go, waving to a few familiar faces on the street, before climbing into his 1962 Ford truck and driving home. It was, though no one knew it then, the last time he would ever see Mary alive. By 10:30, Ruby's diner had gone quiet. Only 3 customers remained. Mr. Peterson, a 68-year-old widower, sat in his usual booth, the same one he'd occupied nearly every night, reading the Lindbrook Salem Journal. 2 teenagers, Billy Ray and Ricky Dale, both 16, were sharing a single milkshake, laughing softly and talking about girls, and at the counter sat Randy Platt, a 33-year-old truck driver grabbing a late dinner before continuing his overnight route. Mary moved through her closing routine with her usual care. She refilled the sugar and salt shakers, wiped down the tables, brewed one last fresh pot of coffee, something she always did to make the next morning easier. The floor gleamed under the diner's fading neon light. Martha Washington, the other waitress, had already clocked out at 10. Her shift ended early, and she still had a long walk home. That left Mary as the only waitress in the building. At 10:45, Mr. Peterson folded his newspaper neatly, placed $1.23 tip, exactly 15% as always, beside his empty cup, and stood. "Good night, Mary," he said gently. "Good night, Mr. Peterson. See you Monday," she replied, waving as he stepped into the crisp November air. At 10:52, the 2 teenagers finished their milkshake. Billy paid 35 cents and left a dime as a tip. "Thank you, Miss Willa," he said cheerfully, having mixed up her name. "You're welcome, boys. Stay out of trouble," Mary teased. They laughed, pushing each other playfully as they disappeared down 4th Street, unaware they were the last to see her alive. Earlier that week, Willa had teased Mary for being too careful with closing duties. "You treat that place like a cathedral," she'd said. Mary had just smiled and answered, "Well, you never know who might walk in last." That night, someone did. By 11:05, the diner's lights still glowed behind the glass, but no one inside would ever speak again. When the sun rose the next morning, the coffee pot was still warm, a half-folded rag lay on the counter, and Mary's apron hung neatly by the register, untouched. And somewhere inside Ruby's diner, the silence was hiding something. That left only Randy Platt. The 33-year-old trucker sat at the counter, finishing his hamburger and fries, idly flipping through a worn trucker's magazine. At 10:58 p.m., he pushed his empty plate aside, paid his AEA 2.15 bill, and left a generous 50-cent tip, more than usual for the time. "Thanks for the food," he said with a tired smile. "Drive safely," Mary replied, as she always did, her voice soft but steady. When the door closed behind him, Ruby's diner fell silent. It was 11 p.m. Mary was now completely alone, and crucially, Caleb Allen, the owner, was not there. For reasons that would never be entirely clear, Caleb had left around 9 that evening, claiming a family emergency. He trusted Mary to lock up, even though it went against his own strict policy that no employee ever close alone. But Mary was dependable, his most trusted waitress, and he assumed one night would be fine. At 11:02 p.m., several passers-by reported seeing her through the glass door, turning the key in the lock and flipping the sign to closed. She looked calm, healthy, and perfectly normal. And then, within minutes, 10, maybe 20, something happened, something so swift, so complete, that Mary Lee vanished from inside a locked diner in the middle of town. There were no screams, no signs of struggle, no broken glass, no footprints, nothing to suggest she had ever been there at all. When Caleb Allen returned early the next morning, Saturday, October 29th, at 5:30 a.m., everything appeared as it should. The door was locked, the lights are off, the cash register untouched. He unlocked the door, stepped inside, and began preparing for the morning rush. At 6:15, the first morning waitress, a 42-year-old woman named Dorcas Simon, arrived. She hung her coat by the door and immediately frowned. Something about the air felt off, too still, too quiet. "Where's Mary?" she asked. Caleb barely looked up, assuming Mary had already gone home. But when Dorcas walked behind the counter, she stopped cold. Mary had laughed when Caleb reminded her never to close alone. "Nothing ever happens in Lindbrook," she'd said. "It's just a diner." But that night proved otherwise. Caleb would later insist that he searched every corner of Ruby's diner that morning, every booth, every stall, even the basement. Yet somehow, the woman everyone had seen alive just hours earlier had vanished as if the walls themselves had swallowed her whole, and decades later, those very walls would tell the truth. Every girl, every woman, deserves protection. If you scroll past, you're letting risk win. Get your survival guide in the pinned comment. "Where's Mary?" Dorcas asked, scanning the diner. The overhead lights glowed faintly against the checkered floor. At first glance, everything looked ordinary, but the details told another story. A coffee pot sat scorched on the warmer, the liquid long evaporated. 2 tables were half cleaned, napkin holders still open. The register drawer gaped slightly, a few bills visible inside. Caleb frowned. "She closed last night. She must have gone home." But even as he said it, his voice faltered. Mary would never leave coffee to burn. She would never walk away without cleaning the tables, locking the till, or finishing her checklist. Something felt wrong, deeply wrong. He reached for the phone and dialed the Lee residence. Kate Lee answered on the 3rd ring, her voice groggy. "Mrs. Lee, sorry to call so early. Is Mary there?" Caleb asked. A long pause. "No, she hasn't come home yet. I thought maybe she stayed with a friend." "Caleb, isn't she there?" Caleb's stomach dropped. "She closed last night, but she's not here now." Kate's voice broke mid-sentence. "Oh God." Within 20 minutes, John Lee stormed into Ruby's diner, his face pale, hands trembling. "Where is my daughter?" They searched every inch of the building, every booth, the restrooms, the stockroom, even the cramped kitchen and the back lot. But there was no trace of Mary. Her purse, the one she always left in Caleb's office, was gone. So was her coat, which had hung by the back door the previous night. No footprints, no broken locks, no sign of forced entry. By 7 a.m., the police were called. Detective Frank Bauer, 46 years old and 17 years into the Lindbrook Police Department, arrived with 2 uniformed officers. His reputation was solid, practical, methodical, rarely shaken. He started with the basics. Timeline, last witnesses, missing items. Caleb's answers were steady, but his eyes betrayed unease. Dorcas recounted what she saw that morning. The Lee family hovered near the door, pale with disbelief. Detective Bauer paused as he noticed something odd. Mary's name badge, lying face down near the register. He turned it over slowly, the small engraved letters catching the light. Just 3 nights earlier, Mary had joked about losing it during a rush. Guess if I disappear, they'll know who I was, she'd laughed. Now the joke felt like a prophecy. As Bauer surveyed the spotless diner, his mind caught on one detail, the faint smell of bleach behind the counter, where no one claimed to have cleaned. It wasn't strong enough to alarm the others, but it was there. And what no one knew then was that beneath those very walls, sealed for decades, the answer to Mary Lee's disappearance was already waiting. When did you last see her? Bauer asked, his pen steady above the notebook. Around 9, Caleb replied quietly. I had a family emergency and needed to leave early. Mary said she could handle closing alone. She's done it before. Bauer nodded once. And when you arrived this morning, the place looked exactly how. Front door locked. Light still on. Coffee burning on the warmer. The cash register is open with about $87 inside. Bauer glanced up. So, whoever was here wasn't after money. Everything's accounted for. Caleb double-checked the register, his hands trembling. Yes, nothing's missing. The investigation started immediately. Bauer and his team retraced every step from the night before, talking to everyone who'd been inside Ruby's. Mr. Peterson confirmed he'd seen Mary alive and cheerful at 10:45. The 2 teenagers said the same. 10:52. She'd smiled, joked, completely normal. Randy Platt, the truck driver, was found along his morning route and confirmed he'd left exactly 11 p.m. She was fine, he said. Wiped her hands, said goodnight. That's it. Police canvassed 4th Street for witnesses. 3 people reported seeing Mary turn the key and flip the close sign at 11:02. After that, nothing. No screams, no struggle, no movement at all. It's like she evaporated, Officer Wesley muttered to Detective Bauer. Jack Henry, Mary's boyfriend, was questioned next, as procedure demanded. He'd been cooperative, nervous but steady. I stopped for gas at 10:15, he said, producing the receipt. Then I drove straight home. I didn't see her after dinner. His alibi checked out. Security footage confirmed the time and his route. Still, Bauer kept his eyes on Jack's hands as he spoke, searching for a tremor, a tell, anything. But Jack's fear seemed real, too real. By noon, the case was already drawing attention. Locals gathered outside Ruby's, whispering theories through the glass. A girl vanished behind locked doors in the heart of town. No witness, no sound, no trace. Bauer stood by the counter, staring at the burnt coffee pot. People don't just disappear, he said under his breath. Something or someone took her. He remembered Caleb's words from earlier that morning. Mary's done it before. She had closed that diner alone, trusted, calm, every night the same way, except this one. As Bauer turned toward the back of the diner, his flashlight beam caught a faint reflection on the floor. A streak of something dark, smeared near the kitchen door. He crouched down. Not blood, not coffee, something else entirely. The gas station attendant remembered him clearly. Jack had stopped at around 10:15 and left shortly after. He arrived home at 10:30, just as his parents confirmed. He'd been there all night. Still, the news of Mary's disappearance broke him. Those who saw him the next morning described him as pale, shaking, eyes red from crying. Yet, as is often the case, the closer the heart, the deeper the suspicion. Investigators quietly marked him as their primary person of interest. Search efforts began before sunrise. Volunteers fanned through downtown Lindbrook, searching alleys, vacant lots, and the narrow stretch of Solos Creek that ran 8 blocks from the diner. They found nothing. No footprints, no fabric, no purse, no coat. Mary Lee had simply vanished, like the earth had swallowed her whole. Abra theories spread fast. Some said she'd been lured out the back door, though it was still locked from the inside when Caleb arrived. Others whispered she might have left willingly with someone she knew. But that begged the question, why leave her things behind? And if it was a kidnapping, why no ransom? The Lees were humble people. No one would profit from their pain. The darker theory crept in quietly and never left. Perhaps someone had hidden inside Ruby's before closing. In the storage room, the restroom. Maybe waiting for the last light to fade, for the click of the lock, for the sound of Mary's footsteps alone. That person could have attacked her, silencing her before she could cry for help. But then, how was she taken? The front door faced 4th Street, visible to anyone passing by. The back door opened into an alley with 2 street lamps and 4 houses overlooking it. Carrying a body unnoticed would have been nearly impossible. No one saw anything. And more haunting still, there was no sign of robbery, no trace of assault, no reason anyone could name. Detective Bauer replayed the timeline for the 100th time in his mind, the door locking at 11:02. The lights are still on at dawn. She didn't walk out, he murmured. She was taken out. Somehow. Later that afternoon, as officers canvassed behind the diner, one of them called out from the alley. "Sir, you'll want to see this." Bauer stepped closer, squinting against the sun. There, just beneath the dumpster, half covered in soot and dust, was a single white button. Torn clean from a waitress's uniform, it was Mary's. And that tiny button would be the first real clue, one that would soon unravel the darkest secret Lindbrook had tried to keep buried. Weeks turned into months, and the silence around Mary Lee's disappearance thickened like fog. At first, every local headline screamed her name. "Waitress vanishes from locked diner!" But as weeks dragged on without answers, the columns grew smaller, buried deeper in the papers, until eventually her story slipped from the public's attention entirely. By October of 1972, 7 long years later, Mary was declared legally dead. Her parents never truly lived again after that. Kate Lee's world shrank to the small rooms of her home. Anxiety kept her from even stepping outside without trembling. John grew quiet, hollowed by grief, his hair turning grey faster than the seasons could change. Their surviving children tried to move forward. Jane married in 1968, though the ache of her sister's absence followed her down every aisle of her life. Toby enlisted in the army a year before, perhaps hoping that distance could bury the memories he couldn't face. And Jack Henry, he waited. 2 years he clung to the hope that Mary might walk through his door smiling, apologizing for some impossible misunderstanding. But hope has an expiration date. He eventually married a kind woman named Glory in 1970, raised 3 children and built a quiet, respectable life. Yet those who knew Jack could see it in his eyes. Part of him had never left Ruby's diner that November night. The diner itself survived longer than anyone expected. Caleb Allen ran it until 1968, before finally selling it to a new owner who renamed it Bally's Place. But the bones of the old building stayed the same. Through the decades it wore new faces. Jean's Diner in the 1970s, the Americana Griller in the 1980s, Metro Eats in the 1990s. But beneath every coat of paint and new layer of wallpaper, the structure remained untouched. And beneath it all, the air still carried something heavy. Every owner, at one point or another, mentioned it quietly. A flicker in the reflection of the chrome counter, a door that swung open without a breeze, the faint smell of burned coffee late at night. Caleb once said it best, "You can change the name, but she never really left." It wasn't until the summer of 1998, when new renovations began tearing through the diner's original flooring, that workers unearthed something buried deep beneath the tiles. A small, rusted key, still attached to a pink name tag that read Mary. And from that moment, Ruby's Diner was no longer just a story from the past. It was the beginning of something much darker waiting to resurface. She had been waiting for technology or circumstances. Not in some distant field or forgotten grave, but right there, hidden in plain sight, for more than half a century, while generations passed through the same doorway, drank coffee, and shared laughter. Mary Lee remained sealed just a few meters away. The truth was not buried deep in the woods or lost to time. It had been listening, silently, from behind the bricks of Ruby's Diner. The decades reshaped Lindbrook as much as they reshaped America itself. The tobacco factories that once pulsed with life fell silent. Downtown storefronts emptied as people drifted toward the suburbs. Buildings aged, some left to rot, others gutted and reborn, and others flattened into parking lots. Yet one corner, 4th and Maple, remained stubbornly familiar, as if the ground beneath it refused to let go of what it knew. John Lee passed away in 1992, at 78, after a long battle with lung cancer. He had worked his entire life in the tobacco factory and never once changed a single thing in Mary's room. Her bedspread stayed folded just as she left it that night in 1965. Her uniform hung neatly on the door. Kate survived him by 6 years, dying in 1998 at 82. Even in her final days at the nursing home, she occasionally asked the nurses, "Did anyone ever find my Mary?" Jane, the middle child, married, moved to Brooklyn, and built a life of her own. But even surrounded by her children and grandchildren, she carried an absence she could never explain. She died in 2018 at 84. Toby, who had gone off to Vietnam and later became a teacher, followed in 2022, also at 84. Both siblings left the world without ever learning what became of their sister. Jack Henry outlived them all. He passed away in 2021, aged 90. His wife, Glory, told friends that even in his final years, Jack would sometimes wake in the middle of the night, calling Mary's name. He dreamed of her trapped somewhere, crying out, close enough to touch but forever out of reach. And in a cruel twist of fate, those dreams weren't just grief echoing in his mind. They were echoes from the very walls where Mary had been waiting all along. Because the following year, when the old diner, by then renamed Metro Eats, was sold once again for renovation, the workers tearing through the back wall uncovered something solid, something that shouldn't have been there. Caleb Allen passed away in 1995. Willa June, the diner's steadfast cook, had gone before him in 1988. Detective Frank Bauer, the man who had walked the cold, quiet floors of Ruby's diner that morning in 1965, retired that same year. He died in 2010, the Lee case remaining one of 3 unsolved disappearances that followed him to his grave. Those who knew him said he often sat by his window at dusk, staring at nothing, replaying the same unanswered question. How could a person vanish from a locked room without a trace? The building that had once housed Ruby's diner changed hands countless times. Each new owner painted over the past, different colors, new menus, brighter signs. But none stayed long. The laughter faded. By 2010, the final restaurant closed its doors. For nearly 15 years, the building stood silent, its windows shattered by vandals, its walls marked with graffiti, its floors thick with dust. City officials debated demolition more than once, but paperwork and funding delays kept it standing, like the past itself refusing to be erased. Then, in 2024, progress came calling. A development company bought the property as part of a plan to breathe life into downtown Lindbrook. The old diner was to be demolished and replaced with a sleek new apartment complex, a symbol of renewal, rising where memories had long decayed. On September 21st, 2025, a demolition crew from Carolina Demolition and Construction arrived to begin work. Their supervisor, James Rodriguez, 48, had overseen dozens of projects like this one. To him, it was just another aging building ready to come down. He assembled his 6-man crew and began the process of gutting the interior, tearing down partitions, removing fixtures, stripping away decades of wear. By the third day, March 16th, the crew had reached the area that once served as the diner's kitchen. The air was heavy with dust and the scent of rusted metal. One of the workers, Bo Hunter, 33 years old, swung a sledgehammer into a section of the back wall separating the kitchen from a small, sealed storage space. At exactly 2:30 in the afternoon, the head of the hammer cracked through the bricks, and something strange caught his eye. Behind the jagged hole was not another layer of mortar or old pipework. It was a hollow space. The air that escaped was stale, heavy, and wrong, like the breath of a room that hadn't seen light in half a century. Bo leaned closer, shining his flashlight inside. Something pink reflected back at him, faded and fragile, but unmistakable in shape. It was the same color described in every report, the same uniform Mary Lee had been wearing the night she locked that door for the last time. "Hey, boss," Bo called, his voice unsteady. "You'd better come look at this." Rodriguez approached, peered into the darkness and froze, because behind that wall, untouched since 1965, something human was waiting to be found. When Bo Hunter's sledgehammer broke a bit further through the old brick wall again, he expected dust and rusted pipes, not a hollow void. "Matt, come take a look at this," he called out, stepping back as a cool draft escaped from the small opening. Matt climbed down from the second floor, where he'd been checking ceiling supports. He shone his flashlight through the hole and froze. Behind the wall was a narrow cavity, untouched for decades, and inside it, illuminated by the shaky beam of light, was a human skeleton. It was slumped in a half-seated position against the original bricks, still draped in the fragile remains of a faded pink dress. A small, rotted leather purse rested beside it, along with what looked like a folded coat eaten away by time. "Jesus Christ," Matt muttered, stepping back. "Stop everything. No one touches another thing. Call the police, now." Within the hour, the building was sealed off. The chatter of hammers and drills gave way to the low hum of police radios. By late afternoon, Lindbrook PD detectives had arrived, soon followed by the forensics team. The air inside the diner was thick with a mix of curiosity and unease, as though the building itself had exhaled after holding its secret for 40 years. Dr. Natasha Cheng, the county's medical examiner, crouched near the opening. Her recorder clicked on. "Female," she said steadily, her voice echoing faintly in the hollow space. "Pelvic structure confirms. Estimated age, early 20s. Preservation unusually high, likely due to the sealed environment. Remnants of a pink dress, white apron." She paused, gently tilting the skull. "Severe cranial trauma. occipital fracture consistent with a blunt impact or fall. The crew stood silently behind the caution tape, uneasy. One of the younger workers whispered, "Think it's one of those missing girls they talked about?" Dr. Cheng didn't answer, but her eyes lingered on the worn fabric, pink and white, faded but familiar to anyone who remembered Ruby's diner. A colour scheme just like the uniforms Willa June used to wear, the cook who vanished before anyone noticed she was gone. As evening settled, floodlights illuminated the crumbling diner exterior, and a small crowd gathered behind police barricades. Reporters murmured about the Lindbrook mystery resurfacing again, nearly 4 decades after it had faded from memory. Dr. Cheng's assistant called her over quietly. Inside the purse, beneath the brittle remnants of paper and a rusted key, was a name tag, its letters barely visible but still legible under the flashlight. And when Cheng read the name stitched in red thread, she realized this wasn't just another cold case reopened. It was the one that had never let the town rest. Inside the decayed leather purse, investigators found what time had struggled to erase, small fragments of a life once lived. A wallet, its contents mostly rotted away, still held slivers of identification. A few tarnished coins clinked faintly in an evidence tray. There were keys, a faded lipstick tube, and one item that drew everyone's attention. A small metal name badge, its surface corroded, but not unreadable. "Mary," Dr. Cheng whispered, brushing away the last of the dust. Detective Lenz Appiah, 45, who had recently transferred to the Lindbrook precinct, took over the investigation. He ran the name through archived missing persons reports. Within hours, he had a match that stopped everyone cold. Mary Ann Lee, 23 years old, last seen on November 28, 1965. Employed at Ruby's Diner, the very building now being torn down. Detective Appiah leaned back in his chair, staring at the grainy black and white photo from the file. The woman's smile was bright, hopeful. She could have been anyone's sister, anyone's daughter. "Oh my God," construction supervisor Matt Harrison murmured when told the news. "She's been here all this time, sealed inside that wall for 70 years. The revelation ignited a storm. By evening, every major outlet carried the headline, "70-year mystery solved, missing waitress found walled up in old diner." The story spread like wildfire, part tragedy, part urban legend reborn. But as the cameras rolled and theories multiplied, the deeper truth began to take shape through weeks of forensic work. Experts confirmed that the wall concealing Mary Ann Lee's remains was not part of the diner's original 1947 structure. Someone had built it later, deliberately. Just like the unexplained renovations Willa June once mentioned in her final interview before she died, the one Detective Bauer had dismissed as routine maintenance. Dr. Cheng's report detailed the chilling sequence, the newer layer of bricks, a mismatch in mortar consistency, the lack of interior access. Someone had entombed Mary alive, or after her death, with precision and time to cover their tracks. But what unsettled the investigation most wasn't the wall, it was what they found behind it, tucked in the mortar between 2 bricks, a slip of paper that somehow survived the decades. Faded ink, smudged by age, yet one word still clear enough to read. A single name. And it wasn't Mary. It was a later addition, and construction records confirmed that major renovations were carried out at Ruby's Diner in November 1965, just weeks after Mary's disappearance. Among the listed changes, one stood out. A new brick wall built to close off a small, unused storage room. The permit bore a familiar name, Caleb Allen, approved and signed off as the supervising manager. The contractor responsible, Milo's Construction, had long since gone out of business by 1973, and their project files were lost to time. Still, city records confirmed that masonry work had indeed been completed in late November 1965, almost perfectly aligning with the period following Mary's disappearance. The most plausible theory, drawn from forensic reconstruction and architectural evidence, was deeply unsettling. Mary had been attacked on the night of October 28th while closing the diner alone. The severe cranial trauma suggested a powerful strike, either a deliberate blow or the result of a violent fall. Her attacker, whose identity may never be known, either killed her instantly or left her unconscious. Faced with a body, panic likely took over. There was, at the rear of the kitchen, a narrow doorway leading into a small storage space. It was used infrequently, cluttered with boxes and supplies, the kind of place few people noticed or entered. The attacker hid Mary's body there, perhaps thinking it was temporary, perhaps intending to return. But weeks later, when Caleb Allen ordered renovations to close off that very space, someone, possibly the attacker himself, or perhaps construction workers unknowingly, sealed the new brick wall, trapping Mary forever behind it. Ironically, the same wall Caleb once told customers made the diner feel more modern, more open, had been hiding something far darker. Every smile that passed through that place, every meal served under its glow, carried a secret no one ever imagined. But when investigators examined the wall more closely, they discovered something that didn't fit any of their assumptions. Something that suggested Mary hadn't been dead when those bricks went up. Forensic testing would reveal the faintest traces of fabric and fingerprints pressed from the inside. Whoever sealed that wall hadn't buried a victim. They'd entombed a living soul. This explained why Mary was never found, despite exhaustive searches. She had been there all along, just a few meters from where detectives had stood, from where customers had sat for years eating and laughing, from where life carried on, completely unaware of the secret sealed behind the diner's bricks. Caleb Allen remained the most obvious suspect. He had broken his own rule by leaving Mary to close the diner alone that night. He had supervised the renovations just weeks later. He had both motive and opportunity, but Caleb had been dead for decades, beyond justice, beyond questioning, leaving only silence in his place. Still, other possibilities lingered. Perhaps the killer wasn't Caleb at all, but someone who had hidden inside the diner before closing, someone Mary trusted enough to open the door for, someone who struck, panicked, and left her body in the storage room. Then, by tragic coincidence, that same hidden space had been sealed during Caleb's renovations, entombing her forever, with no living witnesses, no confession, and no surviving evidence beyond the bones. The truth of that night would remain lost. Another secret swallowed by time. Mary Lee was finally laid to rest in April 2025 at Lindbrook Cemetery, on a gentle rise overlooking the very streets where she had once worked, and where her accidental grave had been. The same walls that once echoed with her laughter, plates clattering, jukebox humming, had also become her tomb. The very place she dreamed of leaving had never let her go. But when construction resumed, just weeks later, workers reported hearing faint tapping sounds behind another section of the diner wall, one that hadn't yet been touched. Investigators dismissed it as coincidence. Yet some of the crew refused to return after dark, claiming the tapping always stopped the moment someone looked. And so, even after her discovery, the diner kept one last secret waiting. A story not yet ready to stay buried. A hidden crime in plain sight. She counted on people looking away while alive in the brick. Don't be like them. Hit subscribe now, or you're giving evil the same power he had in 1965. Please comment, I stand for justice. I despise evil. But when Mary Lee was finally laid to rest, something remarkable happened. More than 100 people came to her funeral. Not just family descendants, but townspeople, local historians, and strangers who had grown up hearing whispers of her story. The headstone was simple, yet heavy with meaning. Mary Ann Lee, 1942 to 1965. Waitress, daughter, beloved, finally at peace. The land where Ruby's Diner once stood was preserved as a small memorial. The city of Lindbrook placed a bronze plaque there, telling Mary's story, a story that had haunted the town for 70 years. Over time, the site became part of a quiet pocket garden in the redeveloped downtown. Children played nearby, office workers ate lunch at its benches, few realizing they sat on ground that once hid a tragedy. The case left behind more than sorrow. It left lessons that people can vanish even from crowded places when timing and circumstance align in the cruelest ways. That sometimes, the answers we chase for decades are buried only inches away, sealed within walls we pass by every day. And that in 1965, without cameras, DNA, or digital trails, even the smallest crime could slip into eternity, unsolved, unremembered, until fate decides otherwise. But perhaps the cruelest truth is this: the worst kind of mystery isn't the one that stays unsolved. It's the one solved too late to matter to those who needed closure most. The family that grieved through decades never got to hear the truth. The boyfriend who stayed loyal until the end died still wondering. Her friends, her co-workers, her town, all carried their guilt and confusion into the grave. For Mary Lee, who had only wanted a quiet life, who smiled at regulars, dreamed of marriage, and planned her future, everything ended in violence on that October night. And her story, her laughter, her very existence were entombed behind the bricks of the diner she once loved. The same walls that had echoed with her voice and jukebox songs became her coffin, her ghost trapped within the heartbeat of Lindbrook. Today, 70 years later, the Lindbrook of 2025 looks nothing like the city she knew. The tobacco plants are gone, the streets rebuilt. Yet at night, when the wind cuts through downtown, locals say you can still smell burnt coffee, the same kind that was left on the warmer that night, and hear the faint clink of dishes from a diner that no longer exists. Because in Lindbrook, some stories don't end. They just wait for the next wall to come down. Evil got away with it again, for decades. Every time someone watches and doesn't act, it's a small victory for the Green Ripper. Don't give him that chance. Hit subscribe and comment I stand for good and not evil. The people who had once known Mary Lee, every customer she served, every friend who laughed with her over late-night coffee, every co-worker who locked up after closing, were gone. Yet when the wall was finally torn open, when daylight touched her hidden tomb for the first time in 70 years, there was a quiet justice in it. She was seen again. Her name was spoken again. Her story, once buried behind plaster and brick, was finally told. The mystery of Mary Lee was solved, but what can't be undone is the heartbreak of a young life stolen. A woman who was only 23, who planned for marriage and a home, who vanished without anyone knowing she'd been trapped just inches from where life carried on. The grief of decades, the silent suffering of a family that waited for answers, the haunting thought that she had been there all along. Those wounds never truly healed. When the walls came down, when the last bricks were pried free, Mary Ann, the cheerful waitress who once greeted strangers like family, was released from her prison of concrete and silence. She was finally free. She was finally at peace. But what happened that October night still echoes. The horror didn't come from some passing stranger. It came from someone inside, someone who hid the truth, bricked it over, and returned to work as if nothing had happened. For 70 years, they lived with that secret, until time itself broke the wall and forced the truth into light. Just like the coffee cups Mary used to refill every morning, her story too was refilled, poured back into the world so no one would forget her again. But as Lindbrook redeveloped and the land turned into a memorial garden, another discovery beneath the old foundation hinted that Mary Lee's story might not be the only one buried there.